Hello, everyone. Randy Harrington here. Today, I'm going to bring you a story that I was involved with that involves the Weston State Bend Park over in Missouri. It's on the other side of the river. I live in Leavenworth, Kansas, which is just outside of Kansas City. And so we have a Fort Leavenworth just north of Leavenworth, and then across the river we have Weston State Bend Park. And the title of this is What Does One Park Ranger's Story Weigh? Can you take what a park ranger says and then use that as a template for other park systems? What may or may not be happening in other parks. So the question is, do Bigfoots travel through the Weston State Bend Park? Now here's a map showing the river, the Missouri River, running alongside Fort Leavenworth. Leavenworth is just south of Fort Leavenworth. So you can see that big bend in the river just adjacent to Fort Leavenworth. And I'm sure that's why they call it the Weston State Bend Park, because it's on the bend of that river. So you can see over there on the east side of the river, on the bluffs there, is the Weston State Park. But let's start with some BFRO reports that I read years ago that had me even go over there to even think about asking the questions that I went over there and asked. But it started with reading the BFRO reports. So if you go to the BFRO reports, the geographical index, go to Kansas and then Leavenworth County. There's a report in there right here. It says winter of 1976, a military police find tracks at Fort Leavenworth. Now you can go in and read this on your own, but I'm going to just hit some of the highlights. This young man, well, when he reported it, uh, he was probably older. I think it was 2003, maybe, when it was reported. Uh, but anyways, so of course, when he was in his 20s, he was stationed there as a soldier and was assigned to guarding the CAC building, which is the community or the command center. Fort Leavenworth schools a lot of officers throughout the military, throughout the whole nation. A lot of them come here to go through college and schooling. And anyways, there's a command center, and so his duty was to uh, patrol that command center all night long. So they had some incidents happen there uh, that culminated with an officer having a sighting. And according to this gentleman who made the report, ended up not working there anymore. Don't know if he got, you know, got discharged or just got moved or whatever. But so it's kind of interesting. So you might want to pull this up and read it yourself. But the part that I want to say is there was an officer's daughter who ran away. And so they were scouring the area around the command center since they were on patrol anyways, and there was some snow on the ground, and they were just looking for footprints. So they went down closer to the river, and this is where he reports finding some big tracks in the thicker brush along the river that were larger than his own. He could put his boot inside this naked footprint. Uh, Very interesting. Like I said, you will definitely want to read this yourself. But I want to show you the area that he's talking about. Okay, here's the General Command Staff College here to the left, and then there's the river. So you've got this stretch of woods along here, but that's not where they found the tracks. They found the tracks further north along the river where it opens up behind the airstrip. There's a much bigger area. So in addition, let's just say he says it was a heavily wooded area, river bottom area that extends well over a mile from the actual river. So that tells me where it had to be, because he says it was a mile from the river. Lots of bluffs and limestone cliffs, very, very rugged area, thick vegetation, little to no human activity in the refuge area. Bird hunters and deer hunters seldom went in more than 100 yards or so from the road due to the thickness of the area. Okay, so here's a little further north of the command college, and that's the area along the river there where you can see this huge, huge area in the bend of the river in behind the airstrip. And just across from that is the Weston State Bend Park. But somewhere within that area is where they found the footprints. All right. Now we are going to go to another Bigfoot report. And this was reported uh, from a man, and he said this happened in 1966, and he reported it in 2006. So when he reported it, he was 40 years old. Well, no, it was 40 years after it happened. And if he was there as a man in his 20s, that means he was in his 60s when he reported this. Now, what would make a 60-something-year-old man report a 40-year-old event? I mean, for grins and giggles, that it doesn't make sense that he'd be hoaxing to call this in to the BFRO. It makes sense that somebody that age in their 60s back in 2006 reporting something from 40 years earlier was clearly feeling that it was important that his information go in whatever database was being collected about Bigfoot incidents. So that's how I'm going to take it. And his is a very interesting story. And you, like I said, you might want to go in. This one I did not find on the Leavenworth side. I found this on the Missouri side. So you're going to have to go into the Missouri geological database and go to Platte County. So this is in Platte County, which is on the other side of the river from Leavenworth. So we read a report from the Leavenworth County military base, and now this is a story in Platte County, just over the river, but it's also from a soldier from the military base. And he said he went across the river and headed north on a gravel road, and but I'm going to go ahead and read this. It says, I spoke with the witness on the phone and found him to be very credible. We discussed maps and the location at length. A few additional details were added to the original report. The witness recounted many vivid details regarding the observation. In 1966, the witness returned from Vietnam and requested that he be stationed as close to Sioux City, Iowa as possible, wanting to be near his home. He and his new wife lived just outside of Fort Leavenworth Base. He was hunting deer along the Missouri River on the Missouri side, across from the area of Fort Leavenworth. On the way into this location, he had not seen any other car tracks, so he knew that he was alone. He found a set of tracks, and there was snow on the ground. He said from 3 to 5 in the morning that there was a couple inches of snow that happened that night. So he found a set of tracks that were human looking and large. His size 11 combat boots fit inside the prints and made his feet look small by comparison. The animal had a long stride, and the witness had to jump to produce the same stride. He tracked the animal, and at one point it backtracked on itself, paralleling about 20 yards to one side of where it had walked. Now, don't misconstrue that. He didn't step in his own tracks to try to hide his tracks. He just turned back and went against the grain of his tracks. So it actually went parallel to his tracks, for about 30 to 50 yards. And it was just inside the woods. It did this for 20 to 30 yards and then stood for a while next to 5 or 10 small willow saplings. It stood there long enough to strip the bark off of 2 of them from about 5 feet off the ground on up. The creature then headed towards the river through the thick brush. So it's in snow, it's barefoot, large feet, stripping willow bark, and he couldn't find the willow bark. So I'm assuming that makes it an easy assumption that it must have ate the willow barks unless it was carrying it. And then the witness decided at this point to concentrate on deer hunting. I'm afraid I'd concentrate on getting the hell out of there. Anyways, so let's go to the map. Okay, so here once again, you're going to see an overview of the area. So at the very bottom of this picture, you can see 92 highway, which comes out of Leavenworth, and that's where the bridge is located. So, and when you come out over that bridge and you head north and you come up along the side of that bend, that's the side of the river that he was on. So he was on the Missouri side, somewhere in this area. I mean, I'm assuming that he had not gotten to where the Weston State Bend Park is yet, because he didn't say anything like that. He just said that once he crossed the to the Missouri side, he headed north and was on a gravel road heading north through the woods there along the river. So it would probably be somewhere in this location. So now let's draw our attention to the Weston State Bend Park there at the apex of that bend, to the west there, or to the east. But you can see where it says Weston State Bend Park. So let's go there. All right, so here's a closer view of just within the park itself, and you can see the 92 highway right over there. You know, we call it a highway, but it's just a two-lane road. And since they put in other roads, that's hardly traveled. I mean, maybe somebody going to Weston, which is the small town there north of that park. So, you know, you turn off into that park, and the only campgrounds in this area is up here, not even close to the river. So that's the only place in this park where you can camp in tents. And it's not even set up for, you know, motorhomes or anything like that. It's just tent camping. So a very small designated area to be able to camp at. So you come down here into the park, and I'm going to circle in red this little cluster of buildings right in there. That is where the ranger station was. So because of those reports that I read in the BFRO, I went down there, and you know me, I don't care what people say to me. So I went in and was talking to one of the rangers there, and I told him about my interest in Bigfoot. I told him that I shared with him my encounter at the Chickasaw Park. I said, so I said, I'm over the fact that whether these things are real or not it's out of my grasp at this point. They're real. Now I'm just seeing what else I can find. And my question to him was, could I put game cameras along the river in the thick woods there in this park system? And he was kind of surprised. He wasn't shocked. And he said, you're going to want to talk to the head ranger here. And I said, oh yeah, why? And he said, well, just go talk to her. She'll want to show you something. And the head ranger there was female. So I found this. I was actually looking on the Weston State Bend website, and I found this. I don't think this is the woman that I talked to. Uh, that, but this picture did come up saying, "Say hello to the first chief ranger in the national parks." But I don't think the female that I talked to was the chief ranger there. So she may not have been the first in the park system, because this was about 15 years ago, or maybe a little less, but somewhere a pretty good stretch of time. So maybe it was the first head ranger. I don't know, but I don't remember her quite looking like this. Anyways, but it could be. So I go down the hallway into her office, and the lesser ranger took me down there and said, "Hey, so and so, this guy wants to talk to you about something." So I went in and I told her the whole story that I just told the other ranger, and she was like, "Yeah," she said, "like that's very interesting." And she said, "You're going to want to see some pictures that I have." And I said, I was like what? She said, "We've got some foot tracks. We've got some tracks that we found here on down by the river." And She said there was 8 of them, and she said they're human shaped, they were good sized, and they went into the water. And she said we looked and looked, and we never saw where they came back out of the water. And she showed me a picture, and I wish she would have let me have a copy of that, but it was your typical Bigfoot footprint in the mud, 5 toes. I mean, it it was. I was gobsmacked. The fact that she was openly showing me a picture, telling me that they were found within that park system, and there was 8 of them. They went into the river. Now that river is a fast-flowing river. I think it runs about 8 to 10 miles an hour. So it flows pretty heavy, and it appeared that something went into the water and didn't come out. So it swam across to the Fort Leavenworth side. So from what she told me, we've got a creature that's got no problem swimming that current, going back and forth across that river. So if what she's telling me is true, you have validation of, even though it had been years and years and years earlier that some military guys had reported seeing tracks over there, uh, as well as other activity. So it's very interesting, because my contention has always been, if these things were there once, have they have they left, and why would they leave? And if they haven't left, that just means they are that good at staying hidden. It's crazy. So let's just go from there. Where Oh, and she did tell me, she actually said, because I told her all my Bigfoot stuff, and I was like, wow. I said that is crazy. I said, and I told her about the reports that I had read, on the BFRO from soldiers. And she said, I'm not saying they're Bigfoot tracks. She said, I'm saying that if they're bear tracks, they're grizzly bear. And she just kind of chuckled. And I'm like, well, I said I've seen a few bear tracks, but a lot of times you can see the claw, especially as they sink into the mud quite a bit. I said, I told her I really appreciated her showing me that. I wanted it just for the information of what she was telling me. To me, it verified that yes, indeed, these things are going along the rivers, the bluffs there, all the way up to Nebraska, in that area. So I just thought that was great. So after that, I found a location. Oh yeah, she actually told me that she would have to ask her superiors if I could set cameras up in those areas, and she said it would take a while to hear back from them, and so I would occasionally go back over there to touch base with her to find out what was heard. And it took a few weeks, and I stopped in over there, talked to her, and she said, well, she said, I got some bad news. And I said, what? She said, my superiors said no go on putting any cameras in there. And I was like, crud. So that pretty much ended our conversation. I only went back over there several years ago to with my family, doing walking some trails, and stopped in there just to see if she was still working there, and she was not. But the person I talked to, of course, I told him about my bigfooting stuff, and he said, yeah, he said she was kind of into the bigfooting stuff, and he told me where she went, in a capacity as a ranger to another park system. But I didn't jot it down. I didn't know I'd ever be putting it on a YouTube video, but I'm going by memory. So she's in the park system still somewhere, and it seems like, because of what she has there, that she may entertain the idea that these creatures are there. But that tells me what she said to her superiors about putting the game cams in the park. I mean, did she explain to them why I wanted to do that? Did they squelch it? You know, Interesting idea. So, if you reach out, you may find rangers that are okay with talking about it, but you also may find a rangers who've been told not to talk about it. That's an interesting flip side to that conversation. Well, anyway, so let's look at this. Let's look at this map here. You can see the Weston Bend State Park right down there. I think I keep calling it Weston State Bend, but it's or Weston Bend State Park. But anyways, so right up here you see a little town of Weston. So I came up on 92 and went through the town of Weston. And I'm going to draw my red line, came through Weston. And once you cross out of Weston, there's a little creek there where you have to cross a little bridge. And then there's nothing but farm roads, just big fields where, I mean, the big industrial farm systems. And so I took this farm field road all the way back to a strip of woods, and this here is the levee. So there's a levee there that you have to actually go over, and then drops down into the flat bottoms, the floodplains of the river. But in that floodplain lies some woods. So this is the area that I spent about 2 weeks parking in that spot, listening with my listening devices. I even had a tent, and I set up a tent and camped, had a little campfire. But I spent a couple of weeks just kind of monitoring that little strip of woods that runs along the river, because it runs back along the river right into the park. So I was thinking, unless something is living in the park, or even if something is living in the park, it would still travel, and I was hoping, to stay there long enough that I could maybe hear something or have something happen to make me think that, they were traveling in and out of rural areas back into the park system, maybe. So I did spend 2 weeks in there, and let's go to the next picture. Here's a closer one. So you can see where you come through Weston and down by the river. So again, this is just a closer picture showing you where I was at. And here's an even closer one, all the way down by the river. And you can see that area, right? I mean, that woods was only about 75, 80 yards wide, maybe 100 yards wide, that I could get my vehicle in and actually park and set up a tent. So, and here's even closer. So I believe I was somewhere in this area here. This is where I spent most of my time. Sometimes I would just pull in, if I pulled in after midnight, I would just sit in my truck right there with a parabolic on top of the truck, so I could just kick the seat back and listen. So sometimes I would go over there and just sit for a few hours till the wee hours of the morning, and then I'd go back home. And then there were other times I'd set up a little tent and camp. A couple of times I even took my daughter over there. She was a young teenage girl, and at that time, my two daughters were somewhat interested in what I was doing. So one night we went over there and was just sitting in the truck, and she was on her cell phone and I was on my cell phone. So our faces were lit up in the pitch darkness while we had our headsets on, listening to what was happening outside of the cab of the truck. And there were times we heard some. I mean, I'm not good at identifying, walk up sounds and things like that. So a lot of times, anytime I hear something, I'm like, man, that's interesting. That could be something, but there was no way to tell for sure. But there were some things that we heard, and there was a couple times my daughter got spooked, and she was like, man, can we just go? She said, it feels like there's something out there, kind of making tracks around where we're at, like it's interested in what we're doing, and it was spooking her pretty good. Doesn't mean it wasn't a small animal or an unknown animal, but not a Bigfoot, but it could have been. So I think my tactics were right. I just needed better equipment to monitor it. But I want to show you this. The very top right corner, I'm a circle in red. That's where I was spending my time. So you can see all of this woods along here would be a nice travel to get to the park and out of the park, going anywhere up towards Nebraska. But the thing is, when I was in this parking spot across the river, I'm drawing my red line, there's railroad tracks. And these railroad tracks, about every half an hour, a train would come through. And some of these trains were awfully long. And so I would have to sit there for minutes and minutes and minutes listening to just the rumble of the train tracks of a train running through. And so it didn't take me, it took me a couple of weeks where I was just like, man, I was having a hard time hearing because there were so many trains coming through. So I think the tactic is good. I do think they come through there. It just takes more of an investment that I was willing to put into it. So let's go ahead and just leave you a few pictures of the park. You know, the park system itself. You can see looking down off the bluff there how thick it is. You know, they have things like a tobacco barn. You know, tobacco was a big industry. Maybe it still is. I don't know. But when I was a young man, a lot of kids would go over there and work in the summertime. You know, hanging tobacco in those tobacco barns. But there's an example of a tobacco barn there at this park that you can look at, and all of these walking trails. There's all kinds of walking trails. Lots of lots of low area, thick brushy areas, with plenty of trails, biking trails, walking trails. So it's a nice park, a very thick cover, and something is coming through that park occasionally and crossing to the Fort Leavenworth side, and probably vice versa, probably coming off the Leavenworth side and coming back across to this side. At I don't know how you can infer anything else except for what the ranger said and showed me. So I believe that's what's happening. So here's the last picture. Shows two little kids. They've got a trail there that it's on flat land and it goes all the way to Weston. I mean, it's like 5 miles with woods on both sides. I mean, so it's a good sized park. I believe it's 1,300 acres. And of course, it's got woods on the outside of that park system too. So there's plenty of woods there. So I really hope you enjoyed this. I know I enjoy this. I'm working on some. I've got some good ones, all in and around Leavenworth where I live. I mean, I've talked to some people that's got some interesting stories. So hopefully I can put these down in a way that it's easy to understand. And thank you for tuning in, and thank you for watching. Please share. Get any of your friends that are interested. Maybe get them to subscribe. That always helps it out. Or make a comment. If anybody has been to this park and had anything happen, I want to know about it. So there you have it. Thank you.